Well, the insights that we have for listeners today are really they're ancient insights, but they're as new as today because science keeps providing data for what people knew and had noticed and practices that they had adopted. Really, it's hundreds or thousands of years in order to increase their presence and the way that their minds work. And here are some facts that will string together after a while. But okay, monks, number one, outlast us in general. On average, a monk will live 5 years longer than you or I might, or a group of people would on average. Why is that? Well, it seems like their practice of mindfulness is very much involved. Secondly, you can connect that like as if you're stringing beads on a necklace with the fact that London taxi drivers seem to have increased brain mass. Why is that? Well, because they're memorizing the routes that they have to drive. And it's not just memorization, probably, that's causing them to experience this growth of the parts of the brain that seem to be involved in thoughtfulness and focus. It's that probably when they're thinking, I have to turn left, right, this, that, it's memorized. So there's a mindfulness component to that too. They're not thinking about their lives and the stresses. They really are, quote, lost, but not on the roads, if you will. They are on autopilot in a certain way, and therefore their minds are engaged in a kind of mindfulness activity. Uh, so I just think it's remarkable because all of us probably, I think it's fair to say that all of us would do well to meditate 20 to 30 minutes once or twice a day because the evidence keeps coming in. There isn't a lot of evidence against it. It seems to indicate you're going to make your brain grow, the connections will be enhanced, and you might even live longer. So I don't think there's, and I don't know if you agree or you disagree, Catherine, but I don't think there's much data to suggest otherwise.
No, I think the data is pretty solid. But for me, 20 to 30 minutes twice a day is going to be a long time to try and meditate. But fortunately for people like me, scientists have shown that even 12 minutes a day helps. So, maybe the 12 minutes, but it's not just meditation, it's also prayer. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between what happens when you meditate versus what happens when you're praying. But this isn't pixie dust that people are throwing out there, right? This is solid data. There was a study that was done at Harvard quite a while ago, well, 2011, which is a little while ago. And they found that when there were 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation that were, like you said, around 27 minutes a day, and increased the gray matter in part of our brain that's linked to learning and memory. And so a Harvard study, that's pretty strong.
I think that's very strong. And that same 27 minutes. And by the way, when we talk about mindfulness meditation, it can be as simple as staying awake, but closing your eyes. It's sometimes hard to stay awake if you close your eyes. So some people keep their eyes open and focusing on your breathing in and out. And in doing that, it seems that people are, transported to a kind of different state. And not only did it grow the gray matter such that you would say, oh, so now I have enhanced ability to recall things because there's an area of the brain called the hippocampus, deeply involved in memory. That part of the brain is growing literally, or the connections within it are certainly becoming more robust. But it's also that the fear center, an area of the brain called the amygdala, that's very much it's part of the limbic system, not to get too neurosciency on everybody, but it's part of the limbic system. That reactivity to fear goes down. And so, whether it's 12 minutes or 27 minutes, or it's twice a day, some people say, can you try to meditate 20 minutes twice a day? The interesting thing is that when you said, my life's too busy, and that's what so many people will say, by the way. On the other hand, whenever you, whether it's 12 or 27 minutes or 20 minutes twice a day, whenever you do this, you're reminding yourself that you're the one in control. That's a really wonderful side effect. the minute you take 12 or 20 or 27 minutes to say, this is for me. I'm just going to close my eyes. I'm going to focus on my inspiration and my expiration of my breath. That's all I'm going to think about. You're telling yourself life is not going to encroach upon me completely. I have a moat around me. I'm going to reinforce that notion. Why? Well, you know what? You'll get the minutes back anyhow, because if your brain's working better, it's like you made an investment. It pays interest. It pays dividends. You're going to think more clearly. You're going to be more centered. And anyhow, life's too short. So why not do something that's really good for you and can lower your blood pressure too?
So there's a lot of physical data like blood pressure, and you mentioned fear, anxiety. Those things that stress us out in our lives are the things that can go away with both meditation and prayer. So I don't want to leave the prayer piece out because I know there's a lot of listeners who want to hear about that and what the research has to say. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. But I did want to bring up there's different types of brain waves. Like we have gamma brain waves, we have alpha brain waves. And when they study these Tibetan monks, and this is a different study that was done, this is even older, but 2004, and they found that these monks produce gamma waves 700 to 800% above the average person.
To me, again,
And the gamma waves are the ones that are associated with focus and insights. And so if you have a really stressful job or you have a day where you really need to be really attentive and focused, perhaps meditate or pray for, a few minutes before you even go into your meeting or get busy with the day.
yeah. And, this builds over time. If you can make a practice of it, so much the better. These gamma waves are associated with focus. They're associated with the ability to screen out unwanted stimuli. And the fact that the study didn't come back and say, yeah, there's a 17% change in monks who meditate in terms of their gamma waves in their brain. It's 700% to 800%, 7 to 8 times. That's an enormous, enormous difference. And it's available to people. You don't need to get a prescription. You don't need to go see a counselor for that. All you need to do is be with yourself. Now, there's this saying, the mind is a monkey. Why do they say that? They say that
I've never heard of that. I've never heard that saying.
maybe it's only my saying, but no, I'm sure I've heard it before, because what they mean when they say that is you may think it's going to be easy to sit for 12 minutes or 20 minutes or even 27 minutes or even 20 minutes twice a day. Your mind doesn't want you to do that. Your mind will come up with excuses. Your mind will insert all kinds of other thoughts meant to distract you. Best thing to do is just be kind to yourself and say, I'm just going to keep trying to do this. And if you do have intrusive thoughts during that period of time, you just let them come, let them go. What's that training your mind to do when you think about it? It's training your mind to be able to screen out stresses so that you're not invaded in your central nervous system, literally, by the stresses around you. You're reasserting that you're centered and that you have a core that's kind of inviolable. So, but don't expect it to be easy, because if you try to tell yourself, I'm going to meditate 20 minutes a day, you'll find it hard to find those 20 minutes. You're going to have to decide in a really robust manner. Nope, it's non-negotiable. And that's not easy.
No, it certainly isn't easy. I mean, finding the time is hard, but I think also when people start to think about meditation or praying, the mind also starts to wander, right? Because you're no longer engaged in your phone or your computer or whatever you were doing. You're sitting there, you're peaceful, you're still, and all of a sudden the mind starts going in different places instead of honing in on the breaths in and out. So would have insights on how to meditate, how to get that mind to focus and concentrate.
Yes. First of all, I think it's important to decide that you can when you're going to meditate, because people do better if they say, I always do this at the first thing in the morning, or I get dressed and then I do it, or after work, before I leave, I sit in my car. and I meditate for 20 minutes. By the way, it becomes quite addictive. It's one of the better parts of my day. There are days when I still don't allow myself to do it, or when my mind doesn't allow me to do it. But if you do, it's very centering, it's very relaxing. And that's probably why when they did this NIH study, because they did do an NIH study of people not who do it for 5 days or intermittently for 5 weeks, but people who meditate for, say, 5 to 9 years in this way, transcendental meditation, which is essentially what I just said. It's focusing on the breath. I don't want to make light of the particulars of TM, transcendental meditation. It's basically focusing on the breath with your eyes closed or half closed. They actually avoid, there's a 48% reduction in heart attack and stroke amongst African Americans with heart disease. So that's not everybody, all right? They took a particular subset and they said, well, what will happen if we have people meditate for 5 to 7 years? You get this incredible reduction in heart attack, stroke, and death amongst those people over the next 5 to 7 years. It's mind blowing. It's hard to imagine, well, why wouldn't you invest 20 minutes a day or 20 minutes twice a day, even though you're resisting catheter, and do this if you can live longer, avoid heart attack and stroke, and frankly, have some of the best 20-minute periods of your life, because you are transported kind of to a very nice state of mind when you do this
Without THC.
without THC. And by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that you and I have teamed up to offer folks another way, not just meditating, but another way to improve their mental status, called For Better Mood, which is the number four. It's the number four Better Mood. It's available at 4vitahealth.com. I'm not doing this just as a plug, but because, in fact, I really believe in it. This is a series of naturally occurring ingredients combined, curated by us, that's meant for folks who have consistently low mood but don't have major depression, to take it and lift their mood. And so,
Yeah.
just going to mention that in parentheses because I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of the fact that you and I are doing it together. Again, it's called For Better Mood at 4vita with a V, vitahealth.com. All natural. You could speak to a couple of the ingredients probably. I could, but I'm going to let you do that.
Well, thank you. So now there has ingredients that have been scientifically tested. The ingredients have in For Better Mood. One of them, and we've talked about this on the show before, is rhodiola. And, it's the studies have shown that it increases both mental energy as well as physical energy. So it can help improve the mood. It supports the body's stress and to help us tolerate stress a little bit better. But it also contains many other things. People should go to forvitahealth.com and check it out. There's things in it like skullcap. It has some vitamins in it, vitamin B6, and another one called pantothenic acid, which is vitamin B12. And those nutrients also help bring energy, and they also help with mood. So I hope people will check it out. And if they have any questions about it, feel free to email us at info@forvitahealth.com, and we'll get back to you right away. So should we get
Yes,
back to talking about meditation and prayer?
we should. We should get back to talking about meditation because that's really the central topic today. And when we talk about meditation, for some people that will be very much connected to, or close cousin to, prayer. And we know that when you put prayer, as you like to say, under the microscope, you see remarkable things. Religious men live 5 years longer on average than others. In Austrian and German studies, they looked at 1,100, I think, monks, and saw that those who were religious in a particular way were living 5 years longer. And beyond that, when you look at neuroimaging studies, when you look at the brain, literally imaging it, you see that regardless of what your religion is, you could be Christian, it could be anything else, you can deactivate the parts of the brain that seem to respond to distraction, and you lessen that rumination that can happen if you are regularly prayerful. So praying, and by the way, I think many faiths, that rocking motion that people do when they pray, that's, the Jewish faith and many others, is meditative. You
Mm.
can tell people are in another state. Why do we do that? Well, partly we do that because over the thousands of years, people have learned this centers them. And it doesn't just center them in terms of their emotional lives, it centers them physiologically and neurophysiologically.
Yes, and it's so true, and you mentioned the monks. I don't know if you've ever been to a monastery, but there's an incredible monastery in New Mexico in the hills, and they're Catholic monks, and they do the entire service, everything they do is in Latin, and they also have prayers in the morning, they have church in the morning, and they work throughout the day, right? So they're doing things, throughout the day, but every time I've gone there, they're all so calm. They can have a storm stirring around them, and it just doesn't seem to touch them. And I think, like you say, it's partially because of when you're praying, when you're meditating, your mind goes into, and your brain, really your brain and your mind both go into a different state. And it helps to improve things like your mood. Not only you mentioned heart attacks before, but there's also data that shows that it lowers the stroke risk. That's huge. I mean, physiological changes that happen within our body when we're praying and meditating.
Yeah, and not surprising it would lower stroke because when you look at folks who meditate, you see a decrease in blood pressure, a decrease in the release of stress hormones. And this is, to me, it's kind of miraculous because the thought that less thinking for 20 minutes a day or 20 minutes twice a day or 12 minutes can literally impact your neurophysiology and your endocrine system and your blood pressure in that dramatic a manner shows, if nothing else, the connection between the body and the mind in an incredibly dramatic way. Because if you do the reverse, if you think of the reverse, like if you allow yourself to be captured by today's stresses, if you're constantly involved in conflict, it could have the opposite effect. So there's that mirror image, and this is a good way to immunize yourself from the ravages of, well, the daily stress we all live with.
Well, what about gratitude prayers? Do you think they do anything? Well, if you don't, they actually do, because there's been studies that have shown that when you do prayers of gratitude, which I love doing, even if I just say them in my mind and I'm not speaking them out loud, it links to the reward and happiness, quote unquote, centers, which are linked to where, the pleasurable experiences that we have. But it doesn't have any adverse effects. So why not do it? If there's all this positive and no negative side effects like we see with medications, what would be stopping us? And I'm asking you that question. What would stop us from doing it?
What stops us from doing it is that, in fact, human beings don't want to be alone with their souls to
Mm.
some extent. And that's why we think constantly and we busy ourselves with so many things. And silence can be threatening to people. You worry, oh my God, am I going to start thinking about this or that? Well, actually, the goal is to sort of not be thinking because that will allow your mind and brain and central nervous system to be restored. But people think all the time. It's like an addiction. And so, really, it's worthwhile to think, well, what should the practice really look like? And you mentioned it. You said there's kind of a minimum effective daily dose of meditation or prayer, which is thought to be 10 to 12 minutes a day to achieve the effect. More is better. I would argue for a little bit more. There are people, by the way, who would argue for a lot more. Very few of us have time to meditate an hour or more a day, or we don't think we do. By the way, we might have the time if we just insisted upon it for ourselves. But 10 to 12 minutes is going to be very important. And also, I think having a practice, as I said, it's very important to get into a routine. Some people sit when they meditate. Some people kind of kneel when they meditate, or they sit with their legs crossed when they meditate. Other people use a chair. There might be a particular room in your house that you want to use. You may want to do it at a particular time of the day, as I said. Generally speaking, you're going to want some time alone to do this, obviously. But the nice thing is you can do more of it really anywhere. You can be on a plane and decide you're going to meditate for 30 minutes. Nobody's going to know. It's kind of a very private thing. And so you come up with your own practice. How are you going to do this? And what's the methodology? There's so many books, short books, that say I know one's called How to Meditate. It might be that you're focused on your breathing. There are other people who say a word again and again, a mantra. So you come up with your own practice and don't surrender it. It's yours. You should insist on it for you.
Now, that's great advice. I'm going to say something that might seem a little bit offensive to some people. Maybe not. I hope not. But this is based on research. So there was a study that was published this year that mentions that meditation can trigger highly altered states, both positive as well as negative. But when they looked at prayer, the risk of these unwanted negative altered states changes by about 40%. So there must be something different between prayer and meditation, or it could have just been the group that they were studying. Again, it's just one study, but again, it's something to kind of think about. How does the brain actually work? And what's the difference between meditation and prayer that you might have these negative effects from altered states in meditation, but they reduce when you're praying?
Yeah, that's very interesting because of the spiritual nature of it. And, I happen to think that that's a very healthy part of human beings, our
Mhm.
spirituality, our connection to God. And the really interesting thing for me is this notion that when you exit kind of the rat race, when you decide to do something it's not intuitive. People generally don't think, you know what I think I'll do? I'll just sit around and I'll just focus on my breathing, or I'll repeat a word to myself again and again to stop thinking that you're going to get all of these amazing effects. But it really is true. And, you can then move on and say, you know what I think I'll do? I think I'll insert a little bit of my hopes for myself during this meditation, not obsessively, but just to say, I'm going to put it out to the universe. This is what I'd like to see unfold for me or people I love. That can be done during meditation. Some people do that. And what are you doing? Well, there are those, and I might be one of them, that think that we're all kind of connected. And so you're really not absent when you do this. It could be argued you're more present than ever because you're not siloed in your own little life experience. You're connecting to the universe, some would say, to God, others would say, whether it's meditation or it's prayer, I think you're going to the same basic location, if you will. And I think it's really something that everybody should be trying.
I agree. I think I need to do more of it. And I was thinking about what can you do to help kids, right? As they're growing up, you can teach them certain habits. We all try to teach nieces and nephews for me habits that will carry them through the rest of their life that are positive. And one of them I think is praying, and perhaps another one is is meditating.
I think
To
that's true.
feel maybe that's something, a little bit of advice that is helpful.
I think it's very helpful. So, basic take home message is listen, give it a shot. Don't expect it to be easy. Your mind is going to try to drag you out of meditation or prayer. You'll have to try again and again. It will be worth it. It can change your physiology. It can change literally the way that you think. It can make you live longer. You have to do this. I mean, it's a prescription. I give a prescription. You must try this. Try to meditate or try prayer 20 minutes a day. I'd say 12 minutes. The studies show 10 to 12 minutes. Who doesn't have 10 minutes? And I'd also like to say that we talk about things like this at feelamazingdaily.com, and people can go to feelamazingdaily.com, read about meditation, read about prayer, read about supplements like for better mood, and about our site, 4Vita with a V, the number 4vitahealth.com, because what we want to do is we want to make the nervous system healthier, and we want to make people's lives richer and better and have them feel amazing daily.
This program is for educational and informational purposes only and is not medical advice. Consult a healthcare provider before adding supplements to your diet. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. The products discussed are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.